England 1803. The Somerset countryside glowed golden under the setting summer sun, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns of Oakenridge Hall. Inside the grand manor, Charlotte Sinclair stood before her looking-glass, barely recognizing the young woman who stared back at her. "You look absolutely radiant, Miss Charlotte," her lady's maid Emma said softly, adjusting the pearl hairpins nestled in Charlotte's chestnut curls. "The ivory silk brings out the warmth in your complexion." Charlotte forced a smile that did not reach her amber eyes. "Thank you, Emma. Though I confess I'd rather be in the music room with my pianoforte than preparing for Lady Harrington's ball." 5 years had passed since Charlotte had last attended such a gathering. 5 years since Edmund Westfield had publicly humiliated her, breaking their engagement mere weeks before the wedding to elope with a wealthy merchant's daughter. 5 years of hiding away at Somerset, nursing a wounded heart and wounded pride. "Your father would be so pleased to see you returning to society," Emma continued, smoothing the delicate lace at Charlotte's neckline. "And your sister writes that all of London has been abuzz with news of your return." Charlotte sighed. At 22 she was hardly the fresh-faced debutante she had once been. "I doubt anyone will remember me, Emma, and that suits me perfectly well." The Harrington estate was ablaze with light as their carriage approached. Charlotte felt her stomach twist with apprehension. Her father, Sir Edward Sinclair, squeezed her gloved hand reassuringly. "Courage, my dear," he murmured. "You've hidden away long enough." The ballroom was crowded with the cream of county society when they arrived. Charlotte kept close to her father's side, nodding politely at introductions, but keeping her expression carefully neutral. She had sworn never to give her heart again, and she intended to keep that promise. It was during a country dance that she first noticed him. The crowd seemed to part as he entered, tall and commanding in his impeccably tailored black evening attire. Dark hair swept back from a face that might have been carved from marble, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes that seemed to assess everything and everyone with cool detachment. "Who is that gentleman?" Charlotte asked Lady Anne Harrington, her childhood friend and daughter of their hostess. Anne's eyes widened. "You truly have been hidden away, haven't you? That's William Aldridge, the Duke of Hartwell. They call him the impossible Duke in London." Impossible. Impossible to please, impossible to impress, and most certainly impossible to love, Anne whispered. "He broke his engagement to the Duchess of Wexford years ago, the night before their wedding. Said he couldn't go through with it because he didn't love her. Can you imagine? The scandal was tremendous." Charlotte watched as the Duke moved through the room, barely acknowledging the fluttering young ladies who vied for his attention. "He sounds dreadful." "Oh, he's terribly rich and devastatingly handsome," Anne sighed, and he presented his former fiancée to his best friend, Lord Bentley, who fell madly in love with her. They're blissfully married now with 2 children. "So perhaps he's not entirely dreadful, just particular." Charlotte turned away. "I've had quite enough of particular gentlemen to last a lifetime." She excused herself and made her way to a quieter corner of the ballroom, finding momentary respite near an open window, where the summer breeze offered relief from the heat of too many bodies and too many candles. "You don't appear to be enjoying yourself, Miss—" The deep voice startled her. She turned to find herself looking directly into the grey eyes of the Duke of Hartwell. Up close, they weren't simply cold. They were penetrating, like storm clouds concealing lightning. "Sinclair, Charlotte Sinclair," she replied, offering a curtsy that was just a fraction too shallow to be entirely proper. A flicker of something, surprise perhaps, crossed his face. "Sir Edward's daughter?" "The very same, Your Grace." His gaze swept over her, not in the predatory manner she had grown accustomed to from gentlemen, but with genuine curiosity. "I believe we've met before." "Indeed we have," Charlotte replied coolly, "though I'm not surprised you don't recall. I was 17, and rather forgettable." The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I doubt that very much, Miss Sinclair. You were attending my cousin's wedding at Wellingford Abbey. You spoke precisely 6 words to me. Pardon me, I didn't see you there." The Duke's eyebrows rose slightly. "And you've remembered that all these years?" "Only because you nearly trampled me while pursuing Lady Elizabeth Carrington across the dance floor," Charlotte replied with unexpected frankness. "She was wearing peacock blue silk. You were quite determined." For the first time, William Aldridge looked genuinely disconcerted. Then, to Charlotte's astonishment, he laughed, a rich, warm sound that seemed at odds with his austere appearance. "It seems I must apologize for my past discourtesy, Miss Sinclair," he said with a slight bow. "Perhaps you'll allow me to make amends with a dance." Charlotte's refusal was on the tip of her tongue when her father appeared at her elbow. "Your Grace, what an unexpected pleasure," Sir Edward exclaimed, clearly delighted to find his daughter conversing with the most eligible bachelor in England. Trapped by courtesy, Charlotte had no choice but to accept the Duke's outstretched hand. As he led her onto the dance floor, she felt the eyes of the entire room upon them. "Everyone is staring," she murmured, as they took their places for the quadrille. "Let them," he replied simply. The music began, and Charlotte found herself moving through the steps with practiced grace, grateful that her body remembered what to do even as her mind raced. The Duke was an excellent dancer, his touch light but assured as they circled each other. "You've been absent from society for some time," he observed. "Yes. May I ask why?" "You may ask, Your Grace, but I'm not obliged to answer." Again that ghost of a smile. "Fair enough, Miss Sinclair." As they moved through the figures of the dance, Charlotte was acutely aware of his gaze. It was unsettling, as though he were trying to unravel her with his eyes alone. "What brought you to Somerset, Your Grace?" she asked, determined to shift his attention. "I understood you preferred London." "Business with Lord Harrington," he replied, "though now I find myself grateful for the obligation." The dance ended before Charlotte could formulate a response to such blatant flirtation. She curtsied, he bowed, and she retreated to her father's side with her composure intact, but her pulse betraying her with its rapid beat. Throughout the evening, she felt his eyes following her. Whenever she glanced in his direction, the Duke was watching her with an intensity that made her skin warm. Twice more he asked her to dance. Twice more she accepted, telling herself it was merely politeness. It was well past midnight when their carriage finally turned down the oak-lined drive to Oakenridge Hall. Charlotte sat silently, her dance card full for the first time in years, her mind reeling. "The Duke of Hartwell seemed quite taken with you," her father remarked with poorly concealed delight. Charlotte gazed out the window at the passing trees. "The Duke is merely bored with the usual simpering misses. I provided a novelty, nothing more." "He's requested permission to call on you tomorrow," Sir Edward continued as though she hadn't spoken. Charlotte's head snapped toward her father. "And what did you tell him?" "That we would be delighted to receive him, of course." Sir Edward patted her hand. "Charlotte, my dear, it's time you allowed yourself some happiness." "I am perfectly content with my life as it is," she insisted. But as she lay in bed that night, sleep eluded her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw William Aldridge's face, felt the gentle pressure of his hand on her waist, heard the low rumble of his voice. She had promised herself never to love again, had built walls around her heart that had stood firm for 5 long years. One night, one dance, one look. Surely that wasn't enough to threaten everything. Was it? The morning brought rain, sheets of it cascading down the windows of Oakenridge Hall, turning the lush gardens into a blur of green and grey. Charlotte sat at her writing desk, a half-finished letter to her sister in London before her, her quill hovering indecisively above the parchment. Should she mention the Duke? Eleanor would be ecstatic at the mere suggestion of such a connection, but to acknowledge his attention seemed to give it a significance Charlotte was reluctant to admit. A gentle knock at the door saved her from the decision. Emma entered carrying a silver tray with a single envelope upon it. "A messenger just arrived from Harrington House, Miss Charlotte." Charlotte broke the seal and unfolded the crisp parchment, her eyes widening as she read. "Is something amiss?" Emma asked, noticing her expression. "It's from the Duke of Hartwell," Charlotte replied, her voice carefully neutral. "He writes that unexpected business requires his immediate return to London, and he regrets that he must postpone his visit." Emma's face fell. "Oh, Miss Charlotte, I'm sorry. You seemed—" "It's of no consequence," Charlotte interrupted briskly, tucking the note away. "I hardly know the man." But as the day wore on, Charlotte found herself unaccountably restless. She tried reading, then needlework, then playing the pianoforte, but nothing held her attention. When her father inquired about the Duke's message at dinner, she relayed the contents with affected indifference. "A pity," Sir Edward sighed, "though I understand he has extensive business interests that require his attention. Perhaps when we return to London for the season—" Charlotte set down her fork with more force than necessary. "Father, please. One dance does not constitute a courtship. 3 dances, Sir Edward corrected with a twinkle in his eye. Charlotte retired early that evening, annoyed at her own disappointment. What did it matter if the Duke had left? It was better this way, safer. 2 weeks passed in the quiet routine that had become her life. The weather cleared, allowing Charlotte to resume her daily walks across the estate. It was during one such walk, as she followed the stream that marked the boundary between Oakenridge and the neighbouring property, that fate intervened. She heard the thundering of hooves before she saw the rider, a blur of dark horse and darker rider, emerging from the copse of trees ahead. The horse reared suddenly, startled by her presence, and for a terrifying moment, Charlotte was certain both beast and rider would tumble into the stream. Instead, the rider controlled the animal with impressive skill, bringing it to a prancing halt mere feet from where she stood frozen. "Miss Sinclair," the Duke of Hartwell said, sounding as surprised as she felt. "I did not expect to encounter anyone out here." Charlotte found her voice, though it came out higher than normal. "You're trespassing, Your Grace." He dismounted in one fluid motion, looking entirely too handsome in his riding attire. "Am I? I was told this was still Harrington land. The stream marks the boundary. You're on Sinclair property now." She gestured to the water gurgling merrily between smooth stones. "Then I must beg your pardon." He gave a small bow, though his eyes never left her face. "Twice now I've nearly run you down. You'll think me terribly ill-mannered." Despite herself, Charlotte felt a smile tug at her lips. "Once more, and I shall have to conclude it's deliberate, Your Grace." "William," he said suddenly. "My friends call me William. Are we friends then? I should like us to be." He took a step closer, leading his horse by the reins. "At the very least, it would allow me to apologize properly for departing so abruptly after the ball." Charlotte lifted her chin. "No apology is necessary. We barely know each other. A situation I'd like to remedy." His grey eyes seemed warmer in the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees. "I've returned to Harrington House for the foreseeable future. Business matters, you understand." "In Somerset? How unusual." A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Indeed." They stood in silence for a moment, the only sounds the burbling of the stream and the occasional snort from his horse. "Would you care to walk with me?" Charlotte found herself asking, surprising them both. "That is, if your business can wait." "I find suddenly that it can," William replied, falling into step beside her as they followed the path along the stream. They walked for over an hour, their conversation flowing with unexpected ease. He told her of his estates in Derbyshire and his townhouse in London. She spoke of her love of music and literature. Neither mentioned his hasty departure or her long absence from society. "You're not at all what I expected, Miss Sinclair," he said, as they turned back toward Oakenridge. "Oh? And what did you expect?" "From what I'd heard, a fragile recluse afraid of her own shadow." Charlotte stopped short. "Is that what they say of me in London?" William winced. "Forgive me." "That was indelicate, but honest," she replied, resuming their walk. "And what do you think now?" He considered her for a long moment. "I think there's a story there, one you're not yet ready to tell." They reached the edge of the formal gardens of Oakenridge Hall all too soon. Charlotte knew she should invite him in for refreshments. It was only proper. But something made her hesitate. "I should return," he said, sensing her reluctance. "But perhaps I might call properly tomorrow, with your father's permission, of course." Charlotte nodded, not trusting herself to speak. William mounted his horse with the same fluid grace with which he danced. Looking down at her, his expression grew serious. "Until tomorrow, Miss Sinclair." She watched him ride away, her heart beating a traitorous rhythm against her ribs. True to his word, the Duke arrived at Oakenridge Hall the following afternoon, and the next, and the next. Each visit lasted longer than the one before. They took walks in the garden, played chess in the drawing room, discussed books and music and art. Charlotte found herself looking forward to his visits with an eagerness that alarmed her. Worse, she found herself studying her reflection more critically each morning, allowing Emma to arrange her hair in more flattering styles, choosing her finest day dresses. On his 5th visit, they sat in the garden, a tea service between them, Sir Edward having excused himself to attend to estate business. "Your father mentioned you'll be returning to London for the season," William said, watching her over the rim of his teacup. "He's determined to see me rejoin society properly," Charlotte replied, though I confess I have little enthusiasm for it. Because of what happened with Mr. Westfield? Charlotte nearly dropped her cup. You know about that? I make it a point to know about things that interest me, William said simply. And I interest you? Very much. His directness was disarming. I know he broke your engagement publicly and cruelly. I know you retreated here afterward. What I don't know is why you've allowed his actions to dictate your life for 5 years. Charlotte set down her cup with deliberate care. You presume too much, Your Grace. William, he corrected gently. And perhaps I do. But I've seen how your eyes light up when you speak of things you love. Music, literature, your family. Yet you've denied yourself the wider world because one foolish man couldn't recognize your worth. It wasn't merely that he broke the engagement, Charlotte said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. It was how he did it. At my own betrothal ball, in front of everyone we knew, he announced that he had found his true love in Miss Catherine Browning, and they would be leaving for Gretna Green that very night. She swallowed hard. He said I was too plain, too serious, too forgettable. William's expression darkened. He was an idiot, perhaps, but when everyone looks at you with pity, when whispers follow you everywhere, it became easier to stay away. And now? Charlotte met his gaze squarely. Now I find myself wondering if perhaps it's time to stop hiding. The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. I would very much like to see you in London, Charlotte. It was the first time he had used her given name, and something about the way he said it made her shiver despite the warm summer air. Why? She asked, suddenly bold. You could have any woman in London. Why show interest in someone like me? William leaned forward. Because you're the first woman who doesn't seem to care whether I show interest or not. Because you challenge me, surprise me. Because when I'm with you, I'm not the Duke of Hartwell or the Impossible Duke, or any of the other ridiculous titles society has given me. I'm simply myself. Charlotte's heart hammered in her chest. And who is that exactly? Someone who, until recently, didn't believe he was capable of... He broke off, looking almost startled by what he'd been about to say. Before Charlotte could press him further, Emma appeared at the garden entrance. Miss Charlotte, a visitor has arrived, a Mr. Edmund Westfield. Charlotte felt the blood drain from her face. William rose immediately, his posture tense. Show him in, Emma, Charlotte said, her voice remarkably steady considering the turmoil within. William moved to her side. Would you prefer me to leave? She shook her head. No, please stay. Edmund Westfield had aged in the 5 years since Charlotte had last seen him. His once handsome face had grown puffy, his fashionable clothing unable to disguise the beginnings of a paunch. He stopped short when he saw the Duke. Hartwell, he said, clearly surprised. I didn't realize you were acquainted with the Sinclairs. Mr. Westfield, William acknowledged coolly. Miss Sinclair and I have become good friends. Edmund's gaze darted between them before settling on Charlotte. You're looking well, Charlotte. Marriage agrees with you, I see. Charlotte stiffened. I am not married, Edmund. Oh, his surprise seemed genuine. I had assumed... That is, when I heard you were receiving the Duke of Hartwell. Why are you here? Charlotte interrupted, unwilling to endure his bumbling assumptions. Edmund shifted uncomfortably. I'm staying with the Petersons. I heard you were in residence and thought I should pay my respects. 5 years after humiliating her publicly. William's voice was dangerously soft. How remarkably conscientious of you. Edmund flushed. I don't believe this concerns you, Your Grace. On the contrary, William replied, Miss Sinclair's well-being concerns me greatly. The tension in the garden was palpable. Charlotte rose to her feet, unwilling to let either man speak for her. You've paid your respects, Edmund. Now I think it best you leave. Edmund had the grace to look ashamed. Charlotte, I wanted to apologize. Catherine left me 6 months ago. For a baronet from Cornwall, I've had time to reflect on my behavior, and I realize now what a terrible mistake I made. Charlotte stared at him, astonished by his audacity. You expect me to care about your marital difficulties? I thought perhaps, given our history, we might reconnect. He cast a nervous glance at William. Not immediately, of course, but perhaps once my divorce is finalized. Mr. Westfield, William interrupted, his tone glacial. Allow me to be perfectly clear. Miss Sinclair has no interest in reconnecting with you ever. Edmund drew himself up indignantly. I don't recall asking for your opinion, Hartwell. Edmund, Charlotte said quietly, Please leave. But Charlotte. Now. Her voice was firm, her gaze unwavering. With a last resentful look at the Duke, Edmund bowed stiffly and departed. As soon as he was out of sight, Charlotte sank back into her chair, her knees suddenly weak. William knelt beside her, concern etched on his features. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she said, and was surprised to find it was true. "Actually, I feel relieved. For years I've dreaded seeing him again, imagined all the things I should have said, and now that it's happened—" She gave a small laugh. "He seems so insignificant." William took her hand in his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "You are remarkable, Charlotte Sinclair." The warmth in his eyes made her breath catch. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, and even more surprisingly she wanted him to. Instead he rose, still holding her hand. "I should take my leave. You've had enough excitement for one day." As he walked him to his waiting carriage, Charlotte felt a new lightness in her step. The ghost of Edmund Westfield no longer haunted her. What she didn't yet know was whether she was ready to risk her heart again, especially with a man they called the impossible Duke. The London townhouse of Sir Edward Sinclair, nestled in the fashionable district of Mayfair, bustled with activity as servants unpacked trunks and prepared rooms for the family's return. Charlotte stood at the window of her bedchamber, watching carriages roll past on the rain-slick street below, a letter from the Duke of Hartwell in her hand. 3 weeks had passed since their encounter with Edmund Westfield in the garden at Oakenridge. 3 weeks in which William had continued to call daily, their friendship deepening with each visit. They had spoken of everything and nothing, his childhood as the heir to a dukedom, her close relationship with her sister Eleanor, his passion for improving conditions on his estates, her love of composing music. What they had not discussed was the growing attachment between them. It hung in the air during every conversation, present in the lingering touch of hands, the prolonged gazes, the reluctant goodbyes. Now, in London, Charlotte wondered if things would change. William had promised to call as soon as they were settled, but the season was in full swing. The gossip sheets were already abuzz with news of the Duke's return to town and speculation about which fortunate young lady might finally capture his interest. "The blue silk or the sage green for Lady Pemberton's soirée tonight?" Eleanor asked, sweeping into the room with 2 gowns draped over her arms. At 20, Eleanor was the beauty of the family, with their mother's golden hair and vivacious charm. Charlotte set aside William's letter. "The blue, definitely. It brings out your eyes." Eleanor laid the dresses on the bed and fixed her sister with a knowing look. "Another letter from the Duke?" "That's the 3rd this week." "He merely wishes to ensure we arrived safely in London," Charlotte replied, unable to keep the smile from her face. "Of course," Eleanor teased. "Such concern is perfectly ordinary from a gentleman who visited every day in Somerset and wrote to you 3 times during a journey that took only 2 days. Charlotte threw a pillow at her sister, who dodged it with a laugh. "Admit it," Eleanor persisted. "You're falling in love with him." The words sent a jolt of fear through Charlotte. "Don't be ridiculous. We're friends, nothing more." Eleanor's expression softened. "Charlotte, not every man is Edmund Westfield. You can't close your heart forever because of one disappointment." "It's not that simple, Ellie," Charlotte sighed, turning back to the window. "William has never loved anyone. By his own admission, he doesn't know if he's capable of it, and I'm not sure I'm brave enough to risk being hurt again." Eleanor crossed the room and embraced her sister. "The Charlotte I know has always been the bravest person in any room. She just needed time to remember it." That evening, as their carriage joined the procession outside Lady Pemberton's elegant townhouse, Charlotte felt a familiar anxiety creeping up her spine. This would be her first significant social event in London since her humiliation 5 years earlier. Though most of society had likely forgotten the scandal, she had not forgotten the sting of pitying glances and whispered comments. "So you look lovely," Sir Edward assured her as they waited to be announced. "Your mother would be so proud to see you tonight." Charlotte squeezed her father's arm gratefully. Her gown of deep ivory satin was more sophisticated than the pastels favoured by debutantes, its cut elegant rather than girlishly elaborate. Emma had arranged her chestnut hair in a style that accentuated her high cheekbones and amber eyes. She looked, she had to admit, like a woman rather than the girl who had fled London in tears. "Sir Edward Sinclair, Miss Charlotte Sinclair, and Miss Eleanor Sinclair," the butler announced as they entered the crowded ballroom. Heads turned. Charlotte held her chin high, her expression composed. Let them stare if they wished. She was no longer the heartbroken girl they remembered. Lady Pemberton, a matronly woman with a kind face, greeted them warmly. "My dear Charlotte, what a pleasure to see you back in London. And Eleanor, how you've grown. You'll have every eligible bachelor in attendance at your feet before the night is over." They moved through the room, exchanging pleasantries with old acquaintances. Charlotte was grateful for Eleanor's cheerful chatter, which filled any awkward silences. Though she searched the crowd discreetly, there was no sign of the Duke of Hartwell. "Looking for someone?" a familiar voice murmured near her ear. Charlotte turned to find William standing beside her, resplendent in formal evening attire. Her heart gave a treacherous leap at the sight of him. "Your Grace," she said, dropping into a curtsy. "How unexpected." His mouth quirked into the half-smile she had come to cherish. "Is it? I believe I mentioned in my letter that I would be in attendance." "Did you? I must have forgotten," she replied lightly, though they both knew she had memorized every word of his correspondence. William offered his arm. "May I get you some refreshment, Miss Sinclair?" As they made their way to the refreshment table, Charlotte was acutely aware of the curious glances directed their way. The Duke of Hartwell rarely paid such marked attention to any lady, let alone one who had been absent from society for years. "Everyone is watching us," she murmured, accepting a glass of lemonade from him. "Let them," he replied, echoing his words from their first dance. "I find I care remarkably little for society's opinions these days." "A luxury not all of us can afford," Charlotte reminded him, "particularly when one has a sister making her debut." William's gaze softened as he looked to where Eleanor was surrounded by admirers. "She seems to be managing quite well without our assistance." Before Charlotte could respond, they were joined by a striking woman in a gown of rich burgundy silk. Her dark hair was streaked with silver at the temples, her bearing regal. "William, darling, aren't you going to introduce me to your companion?" she asked, her voice cultured and slightly accented. William straightened. "Of course. Miss Charlotte Sinclair. May I present my mother, Her Grace, the Dowager Duchess of Hartwell." Charlotte curtsied deeply. "Your Grace, it's an honor to meet you." The Duchess's shrewd eyes appraised Charlotte thoroughly. "Miss Sinclair, I've heard a great deal about you from my son." Charlotte glanced at William in surprise. "Have you?" "Indeed," the Duchess confirmed. "He speaks most highly of your musical talent and your literary knowledge. Quite unusual topics for my son to notice in a young lady." William cleared his throat. "Mother," the Duchess waved away his concern. "Oh, don't look so alarmed, William. I'm merely making conversation." She turned back to Charlotte. "I understand you play the pianoforte exceptionally well, Miss Sinclair. Perhaps you would honor us with a performance at my musical evening next week?" "I would be delighted, Your Grace," Charlotte replied, though the thought of performing in front of London society after so long made her stomach clench with nerves. "Excellent," the Duchess nodded approvingly. "I shall send an invitation to Sir Edward tomorrow. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must speak with Lady Pemberton about her dreadful punch." As the Duchess glided away, Charlotte raised an eyebrow at William. "You've discussed me with your mother. She has a way of extracting information," he said, looking uncharacteristically abashed. "But I meant what I said in Somerset, Charlotte. I want to know you better, and I want others to know you as I do." The orchestra struck up a waltz, and William held out his hand. "May I have this dance?" As they took their places among the other couples, Charlotte was reminded of their first dance at Lady Harrington's ball, but this time, as William's hand settled on her waist, there was a familiarity to his touch that sent warmth coursing through her. "You've caused quite a stir," she observed as they moved gracefully across the floor. "The impossible Duke showing particular attention to a lady. I imagine the gossip sheets will be fascinating tomorrow." A shadow crossed William's face. "Does that concern you?" "Should it?" His grip tightened slightly. "No, but I would understand if it did." They danced in silence for several measures, the unspoken tension between them growing with each step. "William," Charlotte finally said, her voice low, "what are we doing?" His grey eyes met hers, intense and searching. "I don't know," he admitted. "I only know that when I'm with you, I feel different. As though I've been sleepwalking through life and suddenly found myself awake." The raw honesty in his voice made her breath catch. "And that frightens you?" "Terrifies me," he corrected with a rueful smile. I've never felt this way before. The waltz ended before Charlotte could respond. As they moved off the dance floor, she noticed a group of fashionable young women watching them, their expressions ranging from curious to envious. "Your admirers seem disappointed," she remarked. William followed her gaze and frowned. "They don't know me. They're interested in the Duke, not the man." "And which am I interested in?" Charlotte challenged. His expression softened. "That's what makes you different, Charlotte. You've never cared about the title." Before she could reply, they were interrupted by the arrival of Eleanor, flushed from dancing. "Charlotte, Lord Ashwood has just told me the most amusing story about his hunting dogs." She curtsied to William. "Your Grace, I hope you don't mind if I steal my sister away. There are several people positively desperate to be reintroduced to her." With an apologetic smile at William, Charlotte allowed herself to be led away. For the next hour, she was passed from one old acquaintance to another, making polite conversation and deflecting gentle inquiries about her long absence from society. Throughout it all, she was aware of William's presence across the room. Occasionally their eyes would meet over the heads of other guests, and each time the connection sent a thrill through her that was becoming increasingly difficult to deny. It was late in the evening when Charlotte found herself momentarily alone near the terrace doors. Seeking fresh air, she stepped outside, grateful for the cool night breeze after the stuffiness of the ballroom. "Hiding, Miss Sinclair?" The voice came from the shadows. Charlotte turned to find a gentleman she didn't recognize lounging against the balustrade, a glass of brandy in his hand. "Simply taking some air, sir," she replied coolly, turning to go back inside. "Don't leave on my account," he said, moving to block her path. "We haven't been properly introduced. I'm Lord Rupert Hastings." There was something in his smile that made Charlotte uneasy. "If we haven't been introduced, my lord, then we shouldn't be speaking, if you'll excuse me." Lord Hastings didn't move. "Come now, no need for such formality. I'm a good friend of Edmund Westfield, you know. He told me all about you." Charlotte felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. "Then you should know better than to believe anything Mr. Westfield says." "On the contrary," Hastings replied, his smile widening unpleasantly. "I found his descriptions most intriguing, particularly his theory that your extended absence from society might have made you more appreciative of male attention." Charlotte drew herself up to her full height. "You are being incredibly rude, sir. Please step aside." "Or what?" "You'll call for your Duke." Hastings sneered. "Everyone knows Hartwell doesn't form attachments. He's merely amusing himself with you until something more interesting comes along." "I believe Miss Sinclair asked you to move, Hastings." William stood in the doorway, his expression thunderous. Hastings straightened immediately, his arrogance faltering under the Duke's icy glare. "Your Grace," he stammered. "I was just leaving," William finished for him, his voice deadly quiet. "Now." Hastings gave a jerky bow and fled back into the ballroom. William moved to Charlotte's side, his concern evident. "Are you all right? Did he harm you?" Charlotte shook her head. "No, just said some unpleasant things. About Edmund and you." William's jaw tightened. "What did he say about me?" "That you don't form attachments. That you're merely amusing yourself with me." She looked up at him, vulnerability evident in her eyes. "Is he right, William?" For a long moment, he simply looked at her, the struggle evident on his face. Then, with a gentle hand, he brushed a stray curl from her cheek. "No," William said, his voice low and fervent. He couldn't be more wrong. The intensity in his eyes made Charlotte's heart quicken. They stood so close she could feel the warmth radiating from him, smell the subtle notes of sandalwood in his cologne. "Then what is this between us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to know, William. I won't risk my heart on uncertainty." William took her gloved hands in his. "I don't have pretty words, Charlotte. I've never been in love before. I didn't think myself capable of it. But these past weeks without you in London have been empty. When I'm with you, everything is clearer, brighter somehow. If that isn't love, then I don't know what is." Charlotte's breath caught. "William." The terrace door opened, spilling light and noise onto their private moment. Sir Edward appeared, his expression concerned. "Charlotte, there you are. Eleanor and I have been looking everywhere." He nodded politely to the Duke. "Your Grace." William released Charlotte's hands reluctantly. "Sir Edward, I was just ensuring Miss Sinclair got some fresh air after the heat of the ballroom." "Very thoughtful," Sir Edward replied, though his eyes narrowed slightly at their proximity. "But I'm afraid we must take our leave. Eleanor is developing a headache." Charlotte nodded, though disappointment coursed through her. "Of course, Father." She turned to William. "Thank you for your company this evening, Your Grace." William bowed over her hand, his lips brushing her knuckles through the thin fabric of her glove. "Until tomorrow, Miss Sinclair." The carriage ride home was quiet, Eleanor having fallen asleep against Charlotte's shoulder. Sir Edward studied his eldest daughter thoughtfully. "The Duke of Hartwell seems quite taken with you," he observed. Charlotte kept her eyes on the passing street lamps. "We enjoy each other's company, that's all." "Charlotte?" Her father's voice was gentle. "I only want your happiness. After what happened with Edmund, I worry." "I know, Father." She squeezed his hand. "But William is nothing like Edmund." "William, is it?" Sir Edward raised an eyebrow. "You've grown close indeed." Charlotte felt a blush warm her cheeks. "He's kind and honourable and different when we're alone. Not the cold, distant Duke everyone believes him to be." Sir Edward nodded slowly. "Just be careful with your heart, my dear. Even the most honourable of men can cause pain when love is involved." The next morning, Charlotte awoke to find London transformed. Rain had given way to brilliant sunshine, and the city seemed to sparkle with renewed vitality. As she sat at breakfast with Eleanor, a footman entered with a small package. "Delivered for you just now, Miss Charlotte," he announced, placing the parcel beside her plate. Charlotte opened it curiously, gasping as she removed a small leather-bound book of poetry, a first edition of Wordsworth that they had discussed during one of their walks in Somerset. Inside was a simple note: "For moments when we cannot talk of poetry in person. Yours, W." "Well?" Eleanor prompted, practically bouncing in her seat with excitement. "What is it?" Charlotte showed her the book, but kept the note private. "A gift from the Duke." Eleanor sighed dreamily. "How romantic. And look, another delivery." A housemaid entered, carrying an enormous arrangement of white roses and lavender, Charlotte's favourite flowers, though she couldn't recall ever mentioning that to William. "The gentleman said to expect him at 2 o'clock, miss," the maid added with a knowing smile. Charlotte spent the morning in a state of nervous anticipation. By the time the clock struck 2, she had changed her dress twice and paced the drawing-room countless times. When William was finally announced, it took all her self-control to remain seated calmly. He entered with purpose in his stride, declining the footman's offer to take his hat and gloves. "Miss Sinclair, I was hoping you might accompany me on a drive through the park. The weather is exceptionally fine today." Charlotte glanced at Eleanor, who was unsuccessfully trying to hide her delighted smile. "I would be happy to, Your Grace. If my sister might join us as chaperone." "Of course," William agreed, though his eyes never left Charlotte's face. His carriage was waiting outside, an elegant phaeton drawn by 4 perfectly matched greys. As they made their way through the fashionable streets, Charlotte was keenly aware of the interested glances directed their way. The Duke of Hartwell rarely drove ladies through Hyde Park during the fashionable hour. "Your gift was most thoughtful," she said, as they entered the park. "How did you know I admired Wordsworth?" "You quoted him during our walk by the stream," William replied. "Something about nature being the anchor of our purest thoughts." Charlotte was touched that he had remembered. "And the flowers. I don't recall mentioning my preferences." From the rear-facing seat, Eleanor piped up, "That would be my doing. His Grace called on Father yesterday while you were visiting Mrs. Fairchild." William shot Eleanor a grateful glance. "Your sister has been most helpful in ensuring my courting efforts meet with approval." Charlotte nearly choked at his blunt use of the word courting. "Is that what you're doing? Courting me?" "With your permission, yes." His grey eyes were serious as they briefly left the road to meet hers. "I realize we've done things somewhat out of order, but I would very much like to court you properly, Charlotte." Eleanor made a small sound of delight from behind them, which they both politely ignored. Charlotte's heart felt too full for her chest. "I think I would like that very much." The next few weeks passed in a whirl of social engagements and private moments. William called at the Sinclair townhouse daily, sometimes accompanying Charlotte and Eleanor on outings to exhibitions or the theatre, other times simply sitting in the drawing room, discussing books or playing chess. At each event they attended together, society's interest in their developing relationship intensified. The gossip sheets began referring to Charlotte as the lady who tamed the impossible Duke, a moniker that made her cringe but seemed to amuse William greatly. Not everyone viewed their attachment favorably. Several disappointed mothers with eligible daughters made their disapproval known through cold glances and cutting remarks just loud enough to be overheard. Lord Hastings continued to spread malicious gossip, fueled no doubt by Edmund Westfield's bitterness. "You shouldn't have to endure such treatment," William said one afternoon as they walked arm in arm through Vauxhall Gardens, Eleanor and her companion following at a discreet distance. "Especially not on my account." Charlotte smiled up at him. "I survived far worse after Edmund. Besides, their opinions matter very little to me now." William's expression darkened at the mention of Edmund. "He's been telling anyone who'll listen that you threw yourself at him when he called at Oakenridge." "Let him talk," Charlotte said firmly. "Those who matter know the truth." William stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "You are extraordinary, Charlotte Sinclair. Do you know that?" His admiration warmed her from within. "You make me feel as though I might be." The tenderness in his gaze made her breath catch. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, right there in the public gardens, with dozens of people milling about. Instead, he simply offered her his arm again, though the charged moment lingered between them. The true test of their courtship came at the Dowager Duchess's musical evening. The Duchess had arranged for Charlotte to perform several pieces on the pianoforte, an honor that filled her with both pride and terror. "What if I make a mistake?" she fretted, as their carriage approached the Duchess's elegant townhouse. "What if everyone remembers me only as the girl Edmund jilted, and now as the girl who embarrassed herself in front of the Tun?" Sir Edward patted her hand reassuringly. "You've been playing since you were 6 years old, my dear. Your talent has never failed you yet." The Duchess's drawing room was crowded with the cream of society when they arrived. William appeared at Charlotte's side almost immediately, resplendent in formal evening wear, his eyes lighting up at the sight of her. "You look beautiful," he murmured, his gaze appreciative on her gown of deep sapphire blue. Charlotte smiled nervously. "I wish your mother had asked anyone else to play this evening." "She wouldn't have asked if she didn't believe in your talent," William assured her. "And I've heard you play at Oakenridge. You have nothing to fear." The Duchess approached, regal in black silk and diamonds. "Miss Sinclair, how lovely to see you again." "Are you prepared to enchant us with your music?" Charlotte curtsied. "I hope not to disappoint, Your Grace." The Duchess's keen eyes assessed her. "My son rarely misjudges character or talent, Miss Sinclair. I trust his assessment of yours." She turned to William. "Though I confess I never thought to see you so besotted, my dear." William didn't deny it. "Mother?" The Duchess waved away his protest. "Oh, don't look so alarmed. I approve heartily. Miss Sinclair has substance, unlike those simpering debutantes you've avoided for years." She took Charlotte's arm. "Now, shall we begin? The guests are eager for some culture amidst all the gossip." As Charlotte took her place at the magnificent grand pianoforte, she felt a momentary panic. The room was filled with expectant faces, some friendly, some merely curious, a few openly skeptical. Among them, she spotted Edmund Westfield, standing near the back with Lord Hastings, both men wearing identical smirks. Then her eyes found William, standing near the instrument, his expression filled with such confidence in her that her fears receded. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The first notes of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata filled the room. Charlotte closed her eyes, letting the music flow through her, forgetting the audience, forgetting everything but the emotion of the piece. When she finished the final movement, there was a moment of complete silence before the room erupted in applause. The Duchess approached, her typically reserved expression softened with genuine admiration. "Magnificent, my dear. Truly moving." Throughout the evening, Charlotte performed several more pieces, each met with increasing enthusiasm. Between performances, William remained close, his pride evident in every glance, every gesture. By the end of the night, even the most critical society matrons were approaching her with compliments and invitations. As the guests began to depart, Charlotte found herself momentarily alone in the Duchess's conservatory, seeking a moment of quiet after the emotional intensity of performing. The glass-walled room was filled with exotic plants and softly illuminated by strategically placed candles, creating an intimate oasis. "There you are." William's voice was soft as he entered the space. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Charlotte smiled. "I needed a moment to collect myself. I still can't quite believe it went so well." "I can," he said, moving to stand before her. You were extraordinary tonight, Charlotte. Everyone saw what I've known since Somerset, that you are the most remarkable woman in London. In the candlelight, his face was cast in dramatic shadows, emphasizing the strength of his features. Charlotte's heart quickened as he took her hands in his. When we were interrupted at Lady Pemberton's ball, he said, his voice low and intense, there was something I wanted to tell you, something I've never said to anyone before. Charlotte could barely breathe. Yes? I love you, Charlotte. The words were simple, spoken with absolute certainty. I didn't know what that meant until I met you. I didn't believe I was capable of it, but now I can't imagine my life without you in it. Tears pricked at Charlotte's eyes. William, You don't have to say anything, he assured her quickly. I know you have every reason to be cautious after what Westfield did to you. I just needed you to know the truth of my feelings. Charlotte shook her head, a smile breaking through her tears. You impossible man. I was trying to tell you that I love you too. The joy that transformed William's face was like sunrise breaking over the horizon. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as Charlotte responded, her hands moving to his shoulders. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, William rested his forehead against hers. I should ask your father's permission to court you officially, he murmured. Charlotte laughed softly. I think he's been expecting it since Somerset. Nevertheless, William straightened, his expression growing serious. I want to do everything properly. You deserve nothing less. A discreet cough from the doorway caused them to step apart quickly. The Dowager Duchess stood there, one eyebrow raised, but a smile playing at her lips. While I wholeheartedly approve of this development, she said dryly, perhaps the conservatory of a well-attended musical evening is not the most prudent location for declarations of affection. Charlotte blushed deeply, but William merely offered his mother an unrepentant smile. We were just discussing my intentions to speak with Sir Edward, mother. I should hope so, the Duchess replied, though her eyes were kind as they rested on Charlotte. Miss Sinclair has quite won over my guests this evening. I dare say you'll have no shortage of supporters for the match. As they rejoined the remaining guests, Charlotte felt as though she were floating. The world seemed brighter, more vibrant somehow. Even the sight of Edmund's sour expression as he observed their returned happiness couldn't dampen her spirits. William spoke privately with Sir Edward the following morning and received his blessing to court Charlotte officially. The announcement in the society papers was met with a flurry of interest and speculation. For a week, all seemed perfect. William called daily, often taking Charlotte for drives in the park or escorting her and Eleanor to various social events. At each gathering they were the center of attention, their obvious affection for each other the subject of much romantic sighing among the younger set. Then came Lady Harrington's midsummer ball. Charlotte had been looking forward to it for days, especially after William hinted that he had something special planned for the evening. She wore her finest gown, a creation of ivory silk embroidered with silver thread that Eleanor declared made her look positively celestial. The ball was in full swing when they arrived, the Harrington townhouse transformed with thousands of candles and masses of summer blooms. William was waiting for them in the entrance hall, his face lighting up at the sight of Charlotte. You take my breath away, he murmured as he bowed over her hand. The evening began perfectly. They danced the first waltz together, then the quadrille. During supper, William kept her laughing with whispered observations about their fellow guests. Charlotte caught herself thinking that this must be what perfect happiness felt like. It was during their second waltz that she noticed the change in him. William's expression had grown distant, his responses to her comments increasingly distracted. When the dance ended, he escorted her back to where Eleanor and Sir Edward stood, his manner oddly formal. If you'll excuse me, he said stiffly, there's a matter I must attend to. Before Charlotte could respond, he was gone, disappearing into the crowd. She waited, making conversation with various acquaintances, but as 1 hour stretched into 2 with no sign of William, anxiety began to gnaw at her. Perhaps he was called away on urgent business, Eleanor suggested kindly. Without a word to me? Charlotte shook her head. Something isn't right, Ellie. It was Sir Edward who finally spotted the Duke, standing on the far side of the ballroom, deep in conversation, with a striking young woman Charlotte had never seen before. The lady was beautiful in an exotic way. her dark hair and olive complexion suggesting Mediterranean heritage, her gown of scarlet silk ensuring she stood out in the sea of pastel-clad debutantes. As Charlotte watched, the woman placed a familiar hand on William's arm, leaning close to speak into his ear. His expression was unreadable, but he made no move to distance himself from her. "Who is that?" Charlotte asked a passing acquaintance, trying to keep her voice casual. "Lady Isabella Valentini," came the reply. "She's half Italian, you know, just returned from Florence after her husband's death. She and the Duke of Hartwell were quite the item before she married the Count 3 years ago." Charlotte felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath her feet. A previous attachment that William had never mentioned. A beautiful widow returned to claim what she had lost. It was like something from a Gothic novel, except that Charlotte was living it. "I wish to leave," she said quietly to her father. "Please, can we go home?" Sir Edward's concerned gaze moved from Charlotte's pale face to the Duke and his companion. "Of course, my dear. I'll call for the carriage." They slipped away without speaking to William. In the carriage, Charlotte sat rigid, staring unseeing at the passing streets as Eleanor held her hand in silent support. "He didn't even tell me about her," Charlotte said finally, her voice small. "If his affections could be so easily diverted by a former attachment, what does that say about his feelings for me?" Sir Edward sighed heavily. "Sometimes, my dear, the past has a powerful hold on us, but that doesn't necessarily mean the present affections are insincere." "Edmund said something similar," Charlotte replied bitterly, "just before he abandoned me for Catherine Browning." Back at home, Charlotte retired immediately to her bedchamber, ignoring Emma's concerned questions about her early return. She sat at her window in the darkness, watching the street below, half hoping to see William's carriage arrive with some reasonable explanation. It was nearly dawn when exhaustion finally claimed her. She awoke to find Eleanor sitting on the edge of her bed, a troubled expression on her lovely face. "There's something you should see," Eleanor said, holding out the morning edition of the London Gazette. The society page featured a detailed account of Lady Harrington's ball, focusing particularly on the reunion of the Duke of Hartwell with his long-lost love, Lady Isabella Valentini. The article speculated that the Duke's interest in Miss Charlotte Sinclair had been merely a diversion while he awaited the widowed Countess's return to London. Charlotte let the paper fall from her numb fingers. "So it's true then?" "There's more," Eleanor said hesitantly. "The Duke called earlier while you were still asleep. Father spoke with him. He's left London, Charlotte, gone to his estate in Derbyshire with no word on when he'll return." The pain that lanced through Charlotte's chest was so acute she couldn't breathe for a moment. "He left without even speaking to me." Eleanor bit her lip. "He left this." She handed Charlotte a sealed letter bearing William's ducal crest. With trembling fingers, Charlotte broke the seal. "My dearest Charlotte, by now you will have seen the gossip sheets and drawn your own conclusions. I cannot blame you if you think the worst of me. Lady Isabella represents a chapter of my life I believed long closed. Her unexpected return has forced me to confront certain truths about myself and my past that I had not fully resolved. I need time to ensure that my feelings for you are as true and unchangeable as I believed them to be. It would be unconscionable for me to promise you forever if there remained any doubt in my heart. I go to Hartwell Hall to seek clarity. I ask for your patience, though I have no right to expect it." With deepest affection, William Charlotte read the letter twice, then carefully folded it and placed it in her desk drawer. When she turned back to Eleanor, her expression was composed, though her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "So the impossible Duke lives up to his name after all," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I was a fool to believe I could be the exception." Eleanor reached for her hand. "Charlotte, don't. He's confused, that's all. He'll realize—" "What he realizes doesn't matter anymore," Charlotte interrupted. "I won't be the woman who waits anxiously for a man to decide if she's worthy of his love. I did that once with Edmund. Never again." As the days passed, Charlotte threw herself into London's social whirl with a determination that concerned her family. She attended every ball, every soirée, every musicale, dancing and laughing as though her heart weren't breaking a little more each day. The gossip sheets, initially filled with speculation about the Duke's sudden departure, and the beautiful Countess who had supposedly reclaimed his heart, gradually moved on to fresher scandals. Lady Isabella, it was reported, had departed for her estates in Italy, though whether the Duke had joined her there no one seemed to know. A fortnight after William's disappearance, Charlotte found herself at the Rutherfords' summer ball, one of the last major events of the season. She had just finished dancing with a pleasant young viscount when she felt a familiar presence at her side. "Miss Sinclair." Charlotte turned slowly, her heart pounding despite her determination to remain unmoved. "Your Grace, how unexpected to see you in London again." William looked tired, she thought, noting the shadows beneath his eyes and the new lines of strain around his mouth. "May I have a moment of your time? Somewhere private?" Part of her wanted to refuse, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain she had endured. But another part, the part that still loved him despite everything, couldn't deny the plea in his eyes. "The terrace," she said with a nod toward the glass doors. "For 5 minutes, no more." Outside, the summer night was warm and fragrant with roses climbing the terrace walls. Charlotte stood with her back straight, her chin lifted, determined not to show how deeply his presence affected her. "You left without a word," she said, breaking the silence first. "After everything you said, everything we shared, you just left." William's expression was anguished. "I know. It was unforgivable. Yet here you are, seeking forgiveness anyway." Charlotte crossed her arms protectively over her chest. "Where is Lady Valentini? I understood you had reconciled." "Isabella is in Italy, where she belongs," William replied firmly. "Whatever was between us died years ago. I needed time to be certain of that, for both our sakes." Charlotte gave a hollow laugh. "How noble of you to spare my feelings by breaking my heart." "Charlotte, please." He took a step toward her, stopping when she flinched back. "I've been at Hartwell Hall these past weeks, thinking of nothing but you, remembering every word, every smile, every moment we shared." "And what conclusion did your great contemplation yield?" she asked, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. William's gaze was steady, his voice low and fervent. "That I am completely, irrevocably in love with you. That the thought of a future without you is unbearable. That I was a fool to let fear and confusion drive me away from the best thing that has ever happened to me." Charlotte felt tears threatening and blinked them away furiously. "Pretty words, Your Grace." "But you've said pretty words before." "Not words, then," William said, reaching into his pocket. "Actions." He withdrew a small velvet box and knelt before her on the stone terrace. Charlotte's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a ring of breathtaking beauty, a perfect sapphire surrounded by diamonds set in platinum. "Charlotte Sinclair," William said, his voice rough with emotion, "I love you with all my heart. I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you, if you'll let me. Will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" For a long moment, Charlotte simply stared at him, her mind racing. This was everything she had dreamed of, everything she had feared to hope for. Yet the memory of his abandonment still stung. "How do I know you won't leave again the next time you have doubts?" she asked softly. "How can I trust you with my heart when you handled it so carelessly before?" William didn't rise, his expression deadly serious. "Because I promise you here and now that I will never again let fear drive me from your side, because these weeks without you have been the most miserable of my life, because I now know with absolute certainty that you are the only woman I will ever love." He took a shaky breath. "I understand your hesitation, Charlotte. I've given you every reason to doubt me. If you need time, I will wait. If you need proof of my devotion, I will spend every day providing it. I ask only for the chance to earn back your trust." Charlotte looked down at the man before her. Not the Duke, not the impossible figure of society gossip, but William, the man who had awakened her heart and shown her that love could be both tender and passionate, challenging and supportive. "Get up," she said finally. William rose slowly, uncertainty in his eyes. Charlotte stepped closer, close enough to see the rapid pulse at his throat, to smell the familiar scent of his cologne. "If you ever leave me like that again," she said, her voice low and intense, "I won't be here when you return. Do you understand?" Hope dawned in his face. "Perfectly. And if Lady Valentini or any other woman from your past reappears—" "They don't matter," he interrupted firmly. "They never did. Not the way you do." Charlotte drew a deep breath. "Then yes, William Aldridge, I will marry you." The joy that transformed his face was like watching the sun break through storm clouds. He slid the ring onto her finger with trembling hands, then pulled her into his arms. his lips finding hers in a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. When they finally parted, both breathless, Charlotte rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Your mother will be pleased," she murmured. "She told me the first time we met that she approved of me." William laughed softly. "My mother has better judgment than I do, apparently. She wrote to me at Hartwell, telling me in no uncertain terms that I was being an idiot and would regret it for the rest of my life if I let you go." Charlotte smiled against his chest. "A wise woman," the Dowager Duchess. As they made their way back to the ballroom to share their news, Charlotte felt a sense of completeness she had never known before. The journey had not been easy for either of them. Both had faced their deepest fears, she of loving and being hurt again, he of opening his heart for the first time. Yet here they were, ready to begin a new chapter together, stronger for having overcome the obstacles in their path. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the Duke of Hartwell's study at his London townhouse, illuminating the piles of correspondence on his desk. William sat reviewing estate reports, but his attention continually drifted to the gardens visible through the tall windows, where Charlotte walked with his mother, their heads bent in conversation. 3 months had passed since their engagement, months filled with preparations for the wedding and for their life together. The initial sensation caused by the announcement had gradually subsided, though Charlotte's transformation from society outcast to future duchess remained a favourite topic in drawing rooms across London. William had insisted on a Christmas wedding, unwilling to wait the full year that tradition might have dictated. Charlotte had happily agreed, eager to begin their life together at Hartwell Hall, which would become their primary residence after a brief honeymoon in the Lake District. A discreet knock at the study door drew William's attention from the window. His butler entered, bearing a silver salver with a calling card. "Sir Edward Sinclair requests a moment of your time, Your Grace." William rose immediately. "Show him in at once." Sir Edward entered, his expression grave enough to send a flicker of alarm through William. "Sir Edward, what an unexpected pleasure. Is everything all right?" "Charlotte is in perfect health," Sir Edward assured him quickly, "and unaware of my visit. I hoped we might speak privately, man to man." William gestured to a chair. "Of course, brandy?" "Rather early, but I think the occasion warrants it," Sir Edward replied, settling into the offered seat. As William poured 2 glasses, his mind raced with possibilities. Had Sir Edward heard some new gossip? Had Edmund Westfield been spreading more malicious lies? "I received a letter this morning," Sir Edward began once they were both settled. "From Lady Isabella Valentini." William nearly choked on his brandy. "I beg your pardon?" Sir Edward withdrew a folded letter from his coat pocket. "She writes quite eloquently about your shared history, about how desperately she regrets her marriage to Count Valentini, and how certain she is that you still harbour feelings for her." "That's absurd," William said firmly. "I haven't spoken to Isabella since the night of Lady Harrington's ball, when I made it absolutely clear that my heart belongs to Charlotte." "I believe you," Sir Edward assured him. "But Lady Valentini seems convinced otherwise. She mentions plans to return to London before Christmas, coincidentally just in time for your wedding to my daughter." William set down his glass with more force than necessary. "I'll write to her immediately. Make it absolutely clear that any attempt to disrupt my marriage to Charlotte will be met with the full force of my displeasure." "I thought you might say that." Sir Edward smiled slightly. "Which is why I've taken the liberty of drafting a response myself. With your approval, of course." He handed William another letter. As the Duke read, his eyebrows rose higher and higher. "This is remarkably direct, Sir Edward." "I found that certain situations require plain speaking," Charlotte's father replied calmly. "The lady has been informed in no uncertain terms that any attempt to contact you, Charlotte, or any member of either family, will result in her immediate ostracism from society, both in England and in Italy, where I happen to have several influential connections." William stared at the older man with newfound respect. "I had no idea you could be so formidable." Sir Edward's expression softened. "When it comes to my daughter's happiness, Your Grace, I am capable of being positively ruthless." William leaned forward, his gaze earnest. "Sir Edward, I swear to you that Isabella means nothing to me. My feelings for Charlotte are the most profound and certain of my life. I would sooner cut off my right arm than cause her a moment's pain." "I know that now," Sir Edward nodded, rising to his feet. "But I had to be sure. Charlotte has suffered enough disappointment to last a lifetime. I couldn't bear to see her hurt again. William stood as well, extending his hand. I understand completely, and I'm grateful for your vigilance. Charlotte is fortunate to have such a father. As they shook hands, a mutual understanding passed between them, the shared determination to protect the woman they both loved, albeit in different ways. After Sir Edward departed, William remained standing by the window, watching as Charlotte and his mother continued their tour of the garden. The autumn sun caught the copper highlights in Charlotte's chestnut hair, and even from a distance, he could see the animation in her expression as she discussed the planned replanting of the rose beds. The thought that anyone, especially Isabella, might threaten Charlotte's happiness filled him with cold fury. He would need to be vigilant in the coming weeks to ensure nothing marred the joy of their wedding day. In the gardens below, Charlotte and the Dowager Duchess had reached the stone bench beneath the ancient oak tree. As they sat, Charlotte removed her gloves, the sapphire engagement ring catching the sunlight. "William tells me you've decided on Hartwell Hall as your primary residence after the wedding," the Duchess remarked, adjusting her shawl against the October breeze. Charlotte nodded. "Yes, though we'll maintain the London house for the season, of course." A wise choice. "The country air will be beneficial when children come along." The Duchess smiled at Charlotte's slight blush. "My son was raised at Hartwell, as was his father before him. There's something to be said for tradition." Charlotte gazed around the formal gardens, imagining them in summer bloom, picturing children, her children, William's children, running along the gravel paths. It feels right somehow, as though Hartwell Hall has been waiting for us. The Duchess reached over to pat Charlotte's hand. "I believe it has. The old house has been lonely since my husband passed. It needs laughter and life again." "I'll do my best to provide both," Charlotte promised. The Duchess studied her future daughter-in-law with approval. "You know, when William was a boy, his father and I worried that he might never know true happiness. He was always so serious, so contained. Even as a child, he kept his feelings locked away." Charlotte nodded, remembering William's own admission that he had never believed himself capable of love. "The change in him since he met you is remarkable," the Duchess continued. "He smiles now, truly smiles, not that polite social mask he wore for so many years. He laughs. He makes plans for the future with enthusiasm rather than duty." "He's changed me too," Charlotte admitted softly. "After Edmund, I thought I'd never trust anyone with my heart again. William showed me that real love is worth the risk." The Duchess squeezed her hand. "You're exactly what my son needs, my dear. What we all needed, I think." As they rose to continue their walk, Charlotte glanced up at the study windows and saw William watching them. She raised a hand in greeting, her heart warming at the smile that transformed his face even at a distance. Later that afternoon, as Charlotte prepared to return to the Sinclair townhouse, William drew her into his study for a private moment. "Must you go?" he asked, his hands resting lightly on her waist. "I've hardly had a moment alone with you all day." Charlotte smiled up at him. "My father is expecting me for dinner, and your mother mentioned some urgent wedding details requiring your attention." William groaned. "More discussions about flower arrangements and table settings, no doubt." "It will all be worth it in the end," Charlotte reminded him, straightening his cravat with familiar ease. "Just think, in less than 2 months, we'll be husband and wife." "Too long," William murmured, pulling her closer. "I count every day until you're truly mine, Charlotte." His kiss was tender yet passionate, a promise of the life they would soon share. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Charlotte rested her forehead against his chest. "I never imagined I could be this happy," she confessed. "Sometimes I fear it can't possibly last." William tilted her chin up, his grey eyes intent on hers. "It will last, Charlotte. I promise you. What we have isn't the fleeting infatuation that society calls love. It's something far stronger, built on understanding and respect as much as passion." Charlotte smiled, drawing comfort from his certainty. "You're right, of course. It's just that sometimes it feels too perfect, as though fate might become jealous of our happiness." "Let fate try," William replied with the arrogant confidence that had once intimidated her and now simply made her smile. "I've fought too hard for this, for us, to let anything stand in our way now." As her carriage pulled away from his townhouse, Charlotte couldn't help but reflect on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this point. From that first reluctant dance at Lady Harrington's ball in Somerset to their engagement, they had overcome doubt, scandal, separation, and their own fears to find their way to each other. The following weeks passed in a whirl of wedding preparations. Charlotte divided her time between fittings for her trousseau, consultations with the Dowager Duchess about the wedding breakfast, and blissful hours with William as they made plans for their future together. Society continued to buzz with talk of the match, though the tone had shifted from initial skepticism to romantic approval. The transformation of the impossible Duke into an openly devoted fiancé had captured the public imagination, turning their courtship into something of a fairy tale. Not everyone rejoiced in their happiness, of course. Edmund Westfield was reportedly bitter about Charlotte's good fortune, though he had retreated to his country estate after several pointed cuts from William's influential friends made London society less welcoming. Lord Hastings continued to mutter darkly about the match in his cups, but found few sympathetic ears. Of Lady Isabella Valentini there was no sign, and Charlotte gradually relaxed her vigilance, choosing to trust in William's love and the strength of their bond. As November drew to a close and December ushered in the Christmas season, London transformed with evergreen garlands, festive ribbons, and the anticipation of holiday gatherings. The Sinclair townhouse bustled with activity as Charlotte's wedding day approached, with Eleanor taking particular delight in her role as chief bridesmaid. "The modiste delivered your wedding dress this morning," Eleanor announced excitedly, bursting into Charlotte's bedchamber one snowy afternoon. "It's absolute perfection, Charlotte. William will be speechless when he sees you." Charlotte looked up from the letter she had been writing to a childhood friend. Did they remember the adjustments to the lace at the neckline? Yes, and the result is exquisite. Eleanor flopped onto Charlotte's bed with a dreamy sigh. It's like something from a romantic novel, the Duke and the lady who broke through his icy reserve with the power of true love. Charlotte laughed. "I think you've been reading too many Gothic romances, Ellie. Our story is hardly so dramatic." "Isn't it, though?" Eleanor propped herself up on her elbows. "The Duke who couldn't love, the lady who swore never to love again, both transformed by a chance encounter at a country ball. If that isn't the stuff of novels, I don't know what is." Before Charlotte could respond, Emma appeared at the door. "Miss Charlotte, a letter has just arrived for you by special messenger." Charlotte took the envelope curiously. It bore no return direction, and the handwriting was unfamiliar, elegant yet somehow aggressive in its bold strokes. Breaking the plain wax seal, she unfolded the single sheet of expensive paper. Her blood ran cold as she read. "Miss Sinclair, you may believe you have won the Duke of Hartwell's heart, but I assure you his affections are not so easily captured or held. William and I share a bond that transcends time and circumstance, a passion that cannot be extinguished by convenient engagements or society's expectations. Ask yourself why he fled to Derbyshire upon my return to London. Ask yourself why a man known for his cold reserve suddenly professes ardent devotion. Is it love, Miss Sinclair, or merely wounded pride that drives him to prove he can secure the hand of the woman society has been watching? William belongs with me, as he has always known in his heart. I have returned to England to claim what is rightfully mine, and I will not be deterred by your provincial charms or your family's ambitions. Lady Isabella Valentini." Charlotte felt the room spin slightly. She had known, of course, that Isabella existed, had even prepared herself for the possibility of encountering her in society after the wedding. But the raw hostility of the letter, the possessive certainty with which this woman claimed William, shook her more deeply than she would have thought possible. "Charlotte?" Eleanor's voice seemed to come from far away. "You've gone white as a sheet. What is it?" With trembling hands, Charlotte passed her the letter. Eleanor's eyes widened as she read, her expression shifting from shock to outrage. "The absolute nerve!" she exclaimed. "This woman is clearly deranged. You must show this to William at once." Charlotte shook her head, her thoughts racing. "No, I need time to think." "Think about what?" Eleanor demanded. "Charlotte, surely you don't give any credence to these poisonous claims?" Did she? Charlotte asked herself. William had left London without a word upon Isabella's return. He had admitted to needing time to ensure his feelings were true and unchangeable. What if the Italian countess was right, and his proposal had been motivated more by pride than love? "I trust William," Charlotte said finally, as much to convince herself as her sister. "But I won't have this woman's venom tainting our wedding preparations. I'll deal with it in my own way." Eleanor looked unconvinced. "At least tell father. He should know that this harpy is making threats." "They're hardly threats, Ellie," Charlotte reasoned, taking back the letter and folding it carefully. "Just spiteful words from a jealous woman." But as she tucked the letter into her writing desk, Charlotte couldn't quite dismiss the chill of foreboding that had settled around her heart. That evening, William called as planned to escort Charlotte and her family to the opera. If he noticed her unusual quietness, he made no comment, attributing it perhaps to the natural nerves of a bride-to-be as the wedding day approached. Throughout the performance, Charlotte found herself watching him surreptitiously, searching for any sign that his affection for her might be less sincere than he claimed. But all she saw was the same tender regard, the same quiet attentiveness that had gradually won her heart over the past months. When he took her hand during a particularly moving aria, the warmth of his touch and the intimate smile they shared dispelled some of her fears. Yet Lady Isabella's letter lingered in the back of her mind, like a shadow on an otherwise sunny day. The following morning, Charlotte made a decision. Rather than allowing Isabella's insinuations to fester, she would confront the situation head-on, not by showing the letter to William, which might only create tension between them, but by meeting with Lady Valentini herself. Through discreet inquiries, Charlotte learned that Isabella had taken rooms at Brown's Hotel in Mayfair. With Eleanor sworn to secrecy, she sent a brief note requesting a private meeting that afternoon. The reply came within the hour, a single line in that same bold handwriting. 4 o'clock. My suite at Brown's. Come alone. "This is madness," Eleanor protested as Charlotte prepared for the meeting. "At least let me accompany you." "And what would that accomplish?" Charlotte asked, selecting a bonnet that framed her face becomingly. "Isabella would never speak freely with you present. I need to look this woman in the eye, Ellie. I need to understand what I'm facing. You're facing a venomous, manipulative harpy who wants your fiancé," Eleanor said bluntly. "What more is there to understand?" Despite her sister's objections, Charlotte departed for Brown's Hotel at precisely 3:30, dressed in a walking suit of deep blue wool that William had once admired for bringing out the amber flecks in her eyes. She had dressed carefully, deliberately, wanting to face Isabella not as a threatened bride, but as a confident woman, secure in her fiancé's love. The hotel was elegantly appointed, catering to wealthy foreign visitors to London. Charlotte gave her name to the concierge, who directed her to a suite on the first floor. Taking a deep breath to steady her nerves, she knocked firmly on the door. It was opened by a lady's maid, who curtsied and ushered Charlotte into a lavishly furnished sitting room dominated by a chaise longue upholstered in crimson silk. Upon it reclined Lady Isabella Valentini. Charlotte's first thought was that the gossip sheets had not exaggerated Isabella's beauty. She was exquisite in a dramatic, almost theatrical way, olive-skinned and dark-eyed, with a lush figure displayed to advantage in a gown of emerald green that would have looked garish on most English women, but suited her exotic colouring perfectly. "Miss Sinclair," Isabella drawled, making no move to rise. Her English was flawless, but coloured with the musical inflections of her Italian heritage. "How conventional you look." Charlotte refused to be baited. "Lady Valentini, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Curiosity." Isabella shrugged one elegant shoulder. "I wanted to see the woman William has chosen to settle for." "Is that what you believe?" Charlotte asked, remaining standing despite the maid's gesture toward a chair. "That the Duke of Hartwell is merely settling?" Isabella's dark eyes assessed Charlotte with lazy contempt. "What else could it be? William and I share a passion that comes once in a lifetime. Our separation was merely a temporary inconvenience." "An inconvenience that lasted through your marriage to another man," Charlotte observed. A flash of something, anger perhaps, or genuine pain, crossed Isabella's perfect features. "Circumstances forced my hand. The Count offered financial security that my family desperately needed. William understood." "Did he?" Charlotte asked softly. "Because from what I understand, he broke off all contact with you after your marriage." Isabella rose in a single fluid movement, like a cat uncoiling. "You know nothing of our history, Miss Sinclair. William and I have a connection that transcends conventional understanding. What I know, Charlotte said steadily, is that William has asked me to be his wife, that he speaks of our future with joy and certainty, that when we are together, there is no shadow of any other woman between us. Isabella gave a brittle laugh. Such charming naivete. Tell me, did he mention me at all before our encounter at Lady Harrington's ball? Did he confide in you about the woman who first awakened his capacity for passion? The question struck uncomfortably close to Charlotte's own doubts. William's past is his own, she replied carefully, as is mine. What matters is the future we choose to build together. How very philosophical, Isabella mocked, moving to a side table to pour herself a glass of wine. She did not offer one to Charlotte. But philosophy provides cold comfort in an empty bed, does it not? Charlotte felt heat rise to her cheeks at the crude implication. I didn't come here to trade insults, Lady Valentini. I came to ask you, woman to woman, to cease your attempts to disrupt my engagement. Isabella sipped her wine, her eyes never leaving Charlotte's face. And if I refuse? Then you will achieve nothing but your own humiliation, Charlotte replied calmly. William has made his choice clear. Continuing to pursue him will only damage your own reputation and standing in society. You think I care for society's opinion? Isabella scoffed. I am a Valentini by marriage, with wealth and connections across Europe. English drawing rooms hold no power over me. Charlotte moved toward the door, having heard enough to confirm her suspicions. Isabella was not motivated by genuine love for William, but by wounded pride and possessiveness. Then I pity you, Lady Valentini. For all your beauty and sophistication, you fail to understand the man you claim to love. Isabella's expression hardened. And you believe you do. I know that William values honor and sincerity above all else, Charlotte said, that he finds peace in meaningful conversation rather than shallow flattery. That beneath his reserved exterior is a man of profound feeling and integrity. And most importantly, I know that he loves me, not as a possession to be claimed or a prize to be won, but as a partner to cherish and respect. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Isabella's face. You speak very confidently for a woman who received my letter only yesterday. Charlotte smiled slightly. Your letter told me more about you than about William. A woman secure in a man's affections doesn't need to threaten his intended bride. With that, she turned to leave, her composure intact despite the emotional strain of the confrontation. This isn't over, Isabella called after her. William will come to his senses before the wedding, you'll see. Charlotte paused at the door, looking back at the beautiful, angry woman. For your own sake, Lady Valentini, I hope you find happiness elsewhere. William has found his with me. The crisp December air outside the hotel was a relief after the oppressive atmosphere of Isabella's suite. As Charlotte walked briskly back toward home, her mind clearer now than it had been since receiving the letter, she found herself smiling. Far from undermining her confidence, the meeting had strengthened it. Seeing Isabella's petty jealousy firsthand, hearing the possessive way she spoke of William as though he were an object rather than a person with his own will and desires, it all confirmed what Charlotte had known in her heart. William had chosen her freely and genuinely. Her step lightened as she turned onto her street, only to stop short at the sight of William himself, pacing anxiously outside the Sinclair townhouse. "Charlotte!" he exclaimed, striding toward her with obvious relief. "Where have you been? Your father said you'd gone out hours ago, and Eleanor refused to tell me where." The concern in his eyes was touching, but Charlotte hesitated to reveal the truth. "I had an errand to attend to. It took longer than expected." William studied her face intently. "What kind of errand leaves you looking so resolute?" Charlotte sighed. There was no point in secrecy now. "I received a letter yesterday from Lady Isabella Valentini." William's expression darkened. "What did it say?" "It doesn't matter now," Charlotte assured him, taking his arm as they walked toward the house. "I went to see her today." "You what?" William stopped abruptly, turning to face her. "Charlotte, that was incredibly unwise. Isabella can be unpredictable." "So I gathered," Charlotte replied dryly. "But I needed to see for myself the woman who claimed such a hold over your heart." William ran a hand through his hair in agitation. "There is no hold, Charlotte. Whatever Isabella may have claimed—" "I know," Charlotte interrupted gently, placing a hand on his chest. "I know, William. I saw it clearly today. She doesn't love you, she merely resents losing her power over you. Relief washed over his features. Then you don't doubt my feelings for you? I did, briefly, Charlotte admitted, when her letter first arrived. But seeing her today, hearing her speak of you as though you were a possession to be reclaimed, it only confirmed what I already knew in my heart, that what we have is real and lasting. William pulled her into his arms, heedless of the impropriety of such a display on a public street. I have half a mind to confront her myself, he muttered against her hair. That would only feed her delusions of importance, Charlotte replied, drawing back to look up at him. Let her be, William. She'll leave London once she realizes her schemes have failed. William gazed down at her with a mixture of admiration and concern. You never cease to amaze me, Charlotte Sinclair. Most women would have succumbed to hysterics or jealous accusations. Charlotte smiled. I'm not most women. No, he agreed, his eyes warm with love. You're the woman I'm going to marry in precisely 18 days, and I cannot wait to make you mine forever. The remaining days before the wedding passed in a blur of final preparations. True to Charlotte's prediction, Lady Isabella departed London soon after their confrontation, reportedly returning to Italy in a flurry of dramatic pronouncements about English barbarism and the superior romantic sensibilities of continental gentlemen. Edmund Westfield made one last, desperate attempt to speak with Charlotte at a pre-wedding celebration hosted by the Dowager Duchess, only to be firmly escorted from the premises by William's imposing butler when he became too insistent. The incident caused a minor stir, but was quickly forgotten in the general excitement surrounding the approaching nuptials. On the eve of her wedding day, Charlotte sat at her dressing table while Emma brushed out her hair for the night. Eleanor perched on the edge of the bed, chattering excitedly about the flowers, the music, the distinguished guests expected to attend. Lady Harrington was saying that half of London is desperate for an invitation, she reported gleefully. The wedding of the year, they're calling it. Charlotte smiled at her sister's reflection in the mirror. It seems strange, doesn't it? 5 years ago, I was the jilted bride no one wanted to acknowledge. Now, everyone wants to witness my triumph. It's not the triumph they care about, Eleanor said wisely. It's the love story. Everyone wants to believe in redemption and second chances, Charlotte. Later, as she lay in bed listening to the soft fall of snow against her window, Charlotte reflected on her sister's words. She and William had both been given a second chance at happiness. She, after the cruel humiliation of Edmund's abandonment, he, after years of emotional isolation. Tomorrow they would begin their life together as husband and wife. Not the fairy tale romance of society gossip, but something far more precious. A partnership built on mutual respect, shared understanding, and a love that had been tested and proven true. The morning of December 20th, 1803, dawned clear and cold, the fresh snow transforming London into a glittering wonderland. At St. George's Church, Hanover Square, the early arrivals found the historic building transformed with evergreen garlands, white roses, and hundreds of candles that cast a warm glow over the proceedings. In a private antechamber, Charlotte stood in her wedding gown, a creation of ivory silk and antique lace that the modiste had declared her masterpiece. Sir Edward, resplendent in his finest coat, blinked suspiciously bright eyes as he beheld his daughter. "You look just like your mother on our wedding day," he said softly. "She would be so proud of the woman you've become, Charlotte." Charlotte squeezed his hand, too emotional to speak. Eleanor, lovely in pale blue as the maid of honor, made last-minute adjustments to Charlotte's veil. "William is already waiting at the altar," she reported, looking terribly handsome and absolutely terrified. Charlotte laughed, the sound reflecting her joy rather than amusement. Not terrified, just aware of the magnitude of the moment. As am I. When the organ began to play and the great doors of the church opened, Charlotte felt a perfect calm settle over her. With her hand on her father's arm, she began the walk toward her future. The church was filled to capacity. The cream of London society turned out in their finest winter attire. But Charlotte saw none of them. Her gaze was fixed on the tall figure standing at the altar, his back straight, his dark head held high. As she reached the halfway point of the aisle, William turned. The look on his face as he beheld her for the first time in her bridal finery was something Charlotte knew she would remember until her dying day. A mixture of awe, adoration, and a joy so profound it seemed to illuminate him from within. When she reached his side, and her father placed her hand in his. William's fingers closed around hers with gentle strength. "You are breathtaking," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of ancient vows and solemn promises. When William slid the gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring, his hands were steady, his eyes never leaving hers. "With this ring, I thee wed," he said clearly, the words carrying to the farthest corners of the hushed church. "With my body I thee worship. With all my worldly goods I thee endow." And then the vicar was pronouncing them husband and wife, and William was drawing her into a kiss that managed to be both properly restrained for the setting and deeply, personally intimate. As they turned to face the congregation, now the Duke and Duchess of Hartwell, Charlotte caught sight of her sister's radiant smile, her father's proud stance, the Dowager Duchess dabbing discreetly at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. The wedding breakfast at Hartwell House was a sumptuous affair, with the finest food and wine served to 200 of London's most distinguished guests. Charlotte and William moved among them, accepting congratulations and well wishes, always returning to each other's side as though drawn by an invisible thread. "Happy, Your Grace," William murmured during a rare moment alone, his lips close to her ear. Charlotte smiled up at her husband, her heart so full it seemed impossible to contain such joy. "Completely, Your Grace." Later, as their carriage bore them away from London toward the Lake District and the private cottage where they would spend their honeymoon, Charlotte rested her head on William's shoulder, watching the winter landscape pass by in the gathering dusk. "What are you thinking?" William asked, his arm around her, holding her close against the December chill. Charlotte considered the question. "I'm thinking about second chances," she said finally, "about how life can surprise you just when you think all hope is lost." William pressed a kiss to her temple. "I never believed in fate until I met you, Charlotte, but now I can't help but think that every step of our lives was leading us to each other." "Even the painful ones?" she asked, thinking of Edmund's cruelty, of William's lonely years believing himself incapable of love. "Especially those," he replied with quiet certainty. "They shaped us, prepared us to recognize and cherish what we found in each other." As the carriage continued its journey through the snowy countryside, Charlotte knew he was right. Their path had not been easy or straightforward, but it had brought them here to this perfect moment, to the beginning of their shared future. She had promised never to love again, and he had never believed he could love at all. Yet here they were, their hearts joined, their souls intertwined, their love a testament to the healing power of second chances and the irresistible force of a love that could set even the most guarded soul on fire. The end. Dear listener, there's something deeply reassuring about a story of love rekindled, isn't there? As Charlotte and William found their way to each other despite past wounds, perhaps you're reminded that the human heart possesses remarkable resilience. Their journey speaks to what many of us know to be true, that life offers unexpected second chances, often when we least expect them, and that our capacity to love again remains intact, even after disappointment or loss. Like Charlotte, many of us have known disappointment. We've felt the sting of betrayal or the quiet ache of loneliness. We've built walls to protect ourselves, sometimes forgetting that those same walls can keep out joy as well as pain. And like William, some of us have lived believing certain emotions were beyond our reach, that we were somehow incapable of the very connections our souls most deeply crave. But life, in its infinite wisdom, often has other plans for us. Your own story, dear listener, carries within it all the dignity and beauty of Charlotte and William's romance. The challenges you've faced, the losses you've endured, the moments when you've had to summon courage you didn't know you possessed, these aren't merely obstacles to overcome. They are the very elements shaping you into someone capable of profound love and deep understanding. As you rest tonight, remember that each chapter of your life has prepared you for the chapters yet to come. The wisdom you've gathered over 60+ years of living is not a burden, but a precious treasure, a collection of moments, both bright and dark, that gives you the unique ability to savor life's sweetness more fully and face its difficulties with well-earned strength and dignity. May you find comfort in knowing that, like the winter snow that blanketed Charlotte and William's wedding day, even the coldest seasons of our lives eventually give way to renewal. Your heart remains as capable of warmth, connection, and yes, even passion as it was in your youth, perhaps even more so, tempered as it is by the wisdom of experience. Rest well tonight. Feel the protective embrace of all who love you, seen and unseen. And most importantly, remember that it is never too late to let your soul be set on fire by the people and experiences that make life worth living. With all our gratitude, Legends of the Fall team. Thank you for staying with us until the end. We hope Charlotte and William's journey reminded you that love can bloom again, even after heartbreak, even when you least expect it. Their story is a testament to the quiet strength of healing, the courage of vulnerability, and the beauty of letting someone into your heart again. If this story moved you, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for supporting us. Your encouragement is what keeps us going, inspiring us to share even more stories filled with love, redemption, and beautiful twists of fate. And don't go just yet. At the end of this video, another unforgettable story awaits. Click and let yourself be swept away once more by a tale just as emotional and powerful as this one. Thank you for being here. The Legends of the Fall team.